times 1 equals 2. How do you come up with that conclusion?
Well, if I was wrong, then they wouldn't have made such a big stink about it. But
If I was wrong, then they wouldn't have made a big stink about it. Yo, nigga, shut the fuck up. Hold on. Nigga, nah. If I was wrong, they wouldn't have made basically a big deal about it. No, nigga. People are wrong all the time and people make big deals about it. Every time someone murders someone, we all think it's wrong and we all make a big deal about it. Could you imagine a murderer? Dude, if I was actually wrong, they wouldn't have made a big deal about it. In other words, I'm right. If I was wrong, they wouldn't have made a big deal about it. So because they made a big deal about it, that means I'm right. You didn't know? You didn't know that's how that worked? Silly fucking idiot. Jesus Christ. I don't know with this guy. They gotta have some good AC in that motherfucker, how this nigga dressed.
You subtract from another prime number and you end up in a prime number. Why they wanted 1 times 1 to equal 1 and the square root of 2 being 1.
They wanted it to... Why, Terrance? Why did they want that? And who the fuck is they? You idiot. Alright, I'm gonna just get into... So I had a debate with someone online. I just wanted to read this shit to you guys. And get this nigga all the way up out of here, okay? So this lady comments how a lot of this shit went over a lot of people's heads and she's happy he's talking about this type of stuff because it's shedding light on, you know, some of the esoteric spiritual things she believes. And some of the stuff I align with, you know what I'm saying? I do believe that the physical world is a product of vibration and frequency at a certain resonance. I believe in a lot of shit like that. A lot of the stuff that he talks about. But then there's a lot of shit he talks about that's a bunch of garbage. We know what deceit is. To deceive someone is the truth mixed with lies. That's what deceit is. It's the truth mixed with lies. So my comment to her was saying, I've watched both the videos all the way through. That one YouTuber, Professor Dave, made a really good rebuttal to Terrance Howard, and I fucked with it. Now, I don't agree with everything Professor Dave says, and there's not a single person on this planet that I agree with everything they say. But a lot of the stuff he said in regards to Terrance Howard was spot the fuck on. So, shout-outs to Professor Dave for that. So, when I'm talking about both videos I've watched, I'm talking about the Terrance Howard video, the original one where he showed up on Joe Rogan, before he showed up again just to get cooked by Eric Weinstein. But I said, so in reference to both videos, the first one on Joe Rogan and then Professor Dave, I said, I've watched both videos all the way through. First, the Terrance one, which seemed all over the place with very little things that resonated with me. Won't say there wasn't any, just very little things. And then there was some stuff that was clearly incorrect and for very easy to explain reasons, like when he says 1 times 1 equals 2, and how that is the basis for most of his work. I think the video Andrew shared, which was somebody else in the comment who shared the video of Professor Dave breaking down Terrance Howard. I said, I think the video Andrew shared did an excellent job breaking down the vibe that I all around picked up from the podcast, which was that Terrance is more concerned with being seen as a genius because he has a God complex rather than just being a genius and allowing his work to speak for itself. He either realizes people are gullible and he's taking advantage, or he genuinely believes the stuff he says. Either way, 1 times 1 will never equal 2. And that is, out of all the incorrect things he said, the most insane that I can't believe people are even considering. It very well, to me, looks like a way to see how easily manipulated the general public is, or at least the people watching podcasts. It's sad to me how fast people are willing to give up basic fundamentals in order to feel special or like they figured something out that most others haven't. That they are woke. If you're genuinely concerned with what's true, I suggest checking out the video from Professor Dave. It was definitely an interesting read. Now, I wasn't even going to talk about her response, but I'm sure there's going to be people who are like, well, what'd she say? She says the dude that made that video didn't even watch Terrance's videos all the way through before jumping on the chance to talk shit for internet likes. At least you watched both before forming an opinion, lol. I'm mostly interested in the resonant theory of the periodic table of elements and how it relates to sound. I think there are pieces of information here that need looked into in order to understand frequency, vibration, and how it manifests matter in different dimensions. I agree with what she said right there. The adequated science we base our everything on is just now admitting that animals might have sentience. So I wouldn't be too confident that our institutions know a whole lot about how things actually function yet. I'm studying science anyway, as I like to delve into every aspect of anything I'm interested in understanding it more thoroughly. This interview is definitely more scattered than the first one I watched. Now I can't find it anymore. He may have a god complex. I don't know the dude personally enough to know. But from the things I've been shown, we are all God incarnated and hold pieces of all creation within us. He mentioned a few times how God is in everything, which is different than I am God, but not to people that just want to argue, I guess. So nobody hears that part. It is a complex system of consciousness, which the planets are a part of. The interplay of magnetism and electricity is inherent in every creation here. If a rotating magnetic field can alter the force of gravity, then wouldn't that make it an effect instead of a force in itself? Tesla said some similar things in his day, trying to explain the Earth as a dimension, not a planet. This man openly admits he's not a scientist and keeps asking scientists to analyze this information. It wouldn't take too much time or too many studies to prove or disprove this. I hope someone does soon. Isn't that the whole point of science? So my reply to that, let me take a drink and a pipe rip one time. Now, I'm not a big YouTuber. I don't expect a lot of people to see this. Maybe one day they do. Regardless, if people did see this, this should be the fucking end of Terrance and his fucking bullshit. Okay? Trust me. Don't trust me. But I consider myself way more spiritual than the average person. If you want to connect psychedelics to spirituality, then I'm probably in the top 2%. Okay? Because I've done more psychedelics than I can even fucking count. Just to connect with God or source or creation or whatever the fuck you want to call it. But have I gone that far off on the fucking deep end? No, I haven't. And I've seen some wild shit. Shit that most people would be like, nigga, we need evidence for that. And I would have to openly admit something that Terrance can't do, that I don't have the evidence for. It's one of those experiential qualities that you have to have for yourself. There's conceptual knowledge and there's experiential knowledge. Some things you just can't know. Well, I guess you can know it in the knowing sense. But there is a form of knowing that happens strictly through experience. Like, I can tell you what something feels like. And you can imagine what that feeling would be like. Feeling it is different than imagining what it feels like. They're just two different things. There's conceptual knowledge and experiential knowledge. So when I tell you, oh, I've done LSD and I've seen constellations, literally lines connecting the stars that depict the images that we see in astrology or whatever the fuck. I've seen that with my own eyes. You'd be like, oh, show me how you saw it. Okay, well, you'd have to take some of this LSD first, my boy, and then look in the sky and tell me that you can't see it. That's what I would say, which is doing a test, running an experiment, gathering data. You know, that's how science works. But some people don't want to do the necessary steps in order to find the solutions to some of their problems or questions that they were trying to get answers to. My response was, whether it was for likes or not, it was accurate. One doesn't need to watch 3 hours of mostly garbage to know it's garbage. If I get through 2 entire hours of a 3-hour podcast and it's all word salad with almost no context, I think it's safe to assume the rest is gibberish. Now, I didn't do that, but I understand why somebody else would. I agree with the things you are talking about regarding sound and matter, but just as easily as you just said all those things that do align with reality, that's as easy as you could dump a bunch of garbage onto all of that like he did, like 1 × 1 = 2, which has been proven wrong along with many other things he said, as the guy in the video so eloquently pointed out. Yes, we are all fragments of God. I believe this to be true. That doesn't negate the idea of a God complex, which isn't saying I believe everything is God. That's not what most people are talking about when saying somebody has a God complex. I should have just said narcissism, or an overly inflated sense of self that carries with it a delusion because it isn't tied to reality. It's one thing to say, I think I look good. That's a subjective opinion about the beauty of something. But to say something like there are no straight lines, it's like, okay, now you're just changing the definition of things to match what you decided to define something as, which isn't in alignment with what 99% of people think these words mean. And if we're trying to understand one another in order to get closer to the truth, it's in everyone's best interest to define terms so we can have a coherent conversation. I can say, knives are not hard, and if you fall on one, there's no chance it will stab you. Now, if I define knives as something, if I define knives as the thing that everyone else would call a squishy ball, then the entire sentence now seems to make sense. Whereas a second ago, when you had an idea of a sharp blade in your mind, after reading knives, it was obvious that nobody would fall on one without the chance of getting stabbed. Easy to change the definition of a word to make myself correct. And sure, one can say we're all God to appear as if they see everyone the same and still hold the position in their mind that they are better. What people say is not always an indicator of how they actually feel. I know a lot of people with huge egos who agree with the concept that everything is God. Meanwhile, they act better than everyone, entitled to everything, carry a victim mindset which is usually tied to it, and act as if they can do no wrong. They frequently throw out the science proves it notion, even though science isn't proof of anything. It's a method that we use in order to discover things, and things change constantly. What may be true today may not be true tomorrow. I'm not impressed when someone admits they're not a scientist either, when it's clear by what he says he's not. But yes, that's what he should be saying because that's the truth. Pat on the back for not lying about being a scientist, Terrance. I believe everything you say now. LOL. Like, I'm not a neurologist, ... Cool beans. Telling people to go do their own research can make one appear as if they must have done their own research, giving most people who are too lazy to or don't have time to even more reason not to, because they assume he already has and that he's being honest. I mean, who wouldn't be telling the truth when they encourage you to look it up for yourself, right? I don't know if you ever seen a video online that you could tell was clearly scripted, but you could also go to the comment section and see all the people who bought into the script, and you're just like, how? How are there this many people who buy this? That's what this feels like for me when watching Terrance, and then seeing people's reaction to it. Not that it's scripted, just that people can't see the clearly incorrect things he's saying, and they want to ignore it because of the few things he said that are correct, and or the feeling it gives them to feel like they're learning something new. For me, if I gotta listen to 99% garbage for 1% truth, some truth that could come without all the garbage, I'm gonna go without ingesting that much garbage. But it's not easy for many people to separate big words from actual intelligence. And this ain't about me. I could care less about Terrance. Don't know the guy personally. Just sad watching other people give up basic fundamentals or seeing how much nobody thinks for themselves. They just hop on the hype train and repeat what everybody else is saying, so long as what everybody is saying is popular, of course, or getting people the attention that the individual is looking for. You said it would take much time to prove or disprove this. I'm not sure what this is when you say that, but nobody needs to prove that he is incorrect. He needs to prove he is correct, and not just with one claim, with all of them. The burden of proof is on the person making a positive claim. And then this is what I gotta say before I head out of here about multiplication, because this came up like a week later in a comment section about this motherfucker. Someone said, prove to me that 1 times 1 is 1. I said easy. Multiplication or times, meaning how many times is something there. If you have 1 book, 1 time, there's 1 book. If you have 3 books, 5 times, there's 35 books. Another way to word this concept that 6-year-olds can grasp is, how many times is there a certain number of things, or another way is, how many times does a certain number of things occur? There is 2 pencils, 2 times. Therefore, you have 4 pencils. If there were 2 pencils 1 time, there would only be 2 pencils because it only occurred 1 time. 1 pencil only occurring 1 time means there is only 1 pencil. In other words, 1 pencil being produced 1 time equals 1 pencil being produced. I legit don't know if there are any more ways to make that make sense, but this guy Terrance is playing word games and simply trying to change what things mean. It's like, yes, if we simply say the word rose means elephant, then somebody would be correct when they looked at an elephant and called it a rose. But most people have no problem agreeing with basic definitions for things in order to understand one another. Anybody can say anything means anything. It proves nothing. That is fact. The definition of any word is man-made. If you want to have coherent conversations, it's in everyone's best interest to find definitions they can agree upon. Get this nigga Terrance Howard all the way the fuck up out of here. I gotta go run some errands. And I wasn't even planning on doing this video today because my shit's been fucking up. I don't know what's up with the audio. I did a whole ass fucking hour-long stream the other day just to find out when I went to play the video that the goddamn audio went mute. All in the middle of the damn shit. I don't know how the fuck that happens. But now I got my shit stuck up on here so I can see if it goes mute. Anyway, y'all take care. Have a good one. Fuck that nigga Terrance Howard. Not as a human being. He deserves air like the rest of us. But when it comes to taking this motherfucker serious, I can't. I used to be in the comment section every time he made a motherfucking appearance on some kind of a fucking post, trying to save the goddamn day and help the people, give them a little ounce of logic and reasoning and how to walk, so they can walk themselves through this bullshit and not land in the headspace or the belief that 1 times 1 equals 2, so they can feel special about themselves and that they got some knowledge that the majority of mankind hasn't found out about. Ooh, you're so special. You know that 1 times 1 equals 2 because you listen to fucking Terrance Howard, who's a Hollywood actor. Act. Good job. Good job, y'all. Catch y'all on the next one. Catch y'all on the next one. Thanks for tuning in. And that's just how it be.